In the fall of 2019, I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment in the heart of the city. It wasn't anything fancy, but it had charm: hardwood floors, tall windows, and an old brick fireplace that gave it character. The building itself was over a century old, and the landlord had kept much of its original design intact. For the price, it was a steal. The first night I moved in, I noticed something odd. The apartment felt heavy. I don't know how else to describe it. It wasn't just the old building creaking or the faint smell of dust and age. It was like the air itself was thicker, pressing against me as I unpacked. But I brushed it off. Old buildings have quirks, and I wasn't about to let my imagination get the better of me. For the first few weeks, nothing major happened, just little things I chalked up to the age of the place. Lights would flicker occasionally, and I'd hear faint noises at night, like footsteps above me or the faint murmur of voices. I assumed it was my upstairs neighbors, though I rarely saw them. But then things started getting specific. One night, around AM, I woke up to the sound of shuffling footsteps in the hallway outside my bedroom. My heart skipped a beat. The apartment was small, and I lived alone. The sound was soft, deliberate, like someone pacing back and forth. I sat up in bed, straining to listen. The footsteps stopped. Then, a moment later, I heard the distinct sound of my kitchen cabinet doors opening and closing. Fear gripped me as I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. Slowly, I crept out of bed and tiptoed toward the kitchen. When I reached the doorway, the light from my phone revealed that all the cabinet doors were wide open. Every single one. I froze. "Hello?" called, my voice trembling. There was no response, just silence. The room felt colder than it had any right to be. I quickly closed the cabinets and went back to bed, leaving every light in the apartment on. The next morning, I convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe I had left the cabinets open earlier and forgot. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. As the weeks went by, the activity escalated. Objects would move on their own. I'd wake up to find chairs pulled out from the table or picture frames knocked over. Once, I came home from work to find my bathroom mirror fogged up, as if someone had just taken a shower, even though I hadn't used it that morning. But the worst part was the feeling of being watched. No matter where I was in the apartment, I couldn't shake the sensation that I wasn't alone. It was strongest in the living room, especially near the fireplace. Sometimes, late at night, I'd catch movement out of the corner of my eye, a shadow that would dart just out of view. One night, I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when I heard a whisper. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. "Get out." I froze, my blood turning to ice. The voice had come from the direction of the fireplace. Slowly, I turned to look, but there was nothing there, just the old bricks and the faint outline of soot. The next day, I called the landlord and asked if he'd ever had complaints about the apartment. He hesitated before admitting that the previous tenant had broken their lease early, claiming the place was too unsettling. I pressed him for more details, but he waved it off as paranoia. "These old buildings make weird noises," he said. "People get spooked easily." That night, I decided to do some digging. I searched online for the history of the building, and what I found left me shaken. In the early 1900s, the building had been a boarding house. It was run by a man named Charles Hayes, who rented out rooms to travelers and workers passing through the city. But Hayes wasn't just a landlord, he was also a killer. Over the span of several years, he murdered at least 5 of his tenants, hiding their bodies in the walls and beneath the floorboards. Eventually, he was caught and executed, but the stories about the building persisted. Some claimed to hear screams at night, while others reported seeing shadowy figures roaming the halls. Armed with this knowledge, I decided to confront whatever was in my apartment. I didn't have much of a plan, just a candle and a rosary my grandmother had given me years ago. I wasn't particularly religious, but I figured it couldn't hurt. I sat in the living room, near the fireplace, and lit the candle. The flickering light cast long shadows on the walls, making the room feel even more oppressive. "If there's anyone here, show yourself," I said, my voice shaking. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the temperature in the room plummeted. My breath came out in visible puffs, and the candle flame began to flicker violently. A low, guttural moan filled the room, emanating from the fireplace. Slowly, A dark shape began to take form, a shadowy figure with no discernible features, just a void where its face should have been. "You shouldn't be here," it said, its voice echoing unnaturally. I stumbled backward, clutching the rosary tightly. "This is my home now," I said, though my voice barely came out as a whisper. The figure moved closer, its presence overwhelming. The air felt heavy, suffocating, and I could feel my chest tightening. Just as I thought I was about to pass out, the candle flame surged, growing brighter and brighter until it was blinding. And then, everything stopped. The room returned to normal, the air warmed, and the shadow was gone. But I knew better than to think it was over. I moved out 2 weeks later. I didn't tell the landlord why, and I didn't look back. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that apartment and the spirits that still linger there. I wonder how many of them were victims, trapped in a place they couldn't escape. And I wonder if Charles Hayes is still there too, watching over his twisted legacy. All I know is that some places hold on to their history, and some spirits never truly leave.